Ready?
I'm ready.
Hey, everybody, welcome to a special report on Saturday. Rudy's Revelation. It is the 29th of June. So I got Perry on the line, or I'm going to get Perry on the line in just a second. We're going to talk about Joe Biden's fail at the debate and the chaos in the DNC as a result of that fail. There is a battle going on between the establishment and the Biden administration, the people around Biden. Biden, I guess, wants to stay in, or at least Jill Biden wants him. Jill Biden and Hunter Biden want the decrepit old man to stay in office so they could benefit from that. But also, will Donald Trump be jailed or restrained? And SCOTUS ruled on obstruction, and that's going to pertain to the January 6th folks. In that case, that they ruled that there was actually not an obstruction. So let's see if we can get Perry on the line.
Hello.
Hey, Perry, welcome. Thanks for joining me today on this special report on Saturday. How are you doing, my brother?
You know, Rudy, I'm having a wonderful start to my weekend thanks to Thursday night. I'm still in the afterglow. And it's not because Uncle Joe did so poorly. It's how much pleasure I'm getting from the Democrats, not only imploding, but literally surrounding each other in a circular firing squad and pointing the finger at each other saying, "It's your fault. No, it's your fault. No, it's your fault." Oh, I love it.
Old Joe just doesn't want to go. The establishment wants him to go. I'm looking at a 25th Amendment or possible Arkansas of Joe Biden in the works, because the establishment won't take no for an answer, but Joe Biden won't go. What do you think? His obviously piss poor performance, no teleprompter, no notes. That's what you get with Joe Biden. Even if it was amped up on Adderall, it appears that he couldn't keep it together.
Well, not only that, but and of course we can't prove this. However, I've been paying attention to a lot of different people on social media who are in one way or another tied to the RNC. And a lot of them were making the claim, whether it's true or not, I don't know. I didn't notice it. He did have an earpiece.
Yes.
And he kept reaching for it, playing with it, because it was probably itching his ear. And somebody told him, stop reaching for your ears.
Right. Because because I think at a certain point, I think about 10 minutes in, they said, like, screw it. And he's like, no one's talking to me now. And he kept going towards his earpiece. And then they were telling him, don't touch your ear because they know what's going on. And he went to scratch it. Yeah, exactly. I saw that as well. And that certainly didn't help him. And I think they let him twist in the wind. I said, as soon as I saw him walk out, I said, they threw him under the bus. It looks like, I don't know if it was on purpose, but after a week of preparation, that was a sad state of affairs.
Well, I guess you and I could say he did manage to walk off stage, but he still needed guidance on how to get there.
Well, off the stage, did you see the after clip where he tried to get off? He stood on the stage for quite a few minutes, and then Jill finally had to escort him off the stage like an invalid. I mean, anybody who saw that must have been like, "Are you kidding? This guy's not running the country."
No, and truthfully, in all seriousness, and candor, that's what should be most concerning to all of us, regardless of party affiliation.
Yeah.
It is frightening that he is not running the country. It's obvious. And why that's so frightening is because we don't know who is. You can't point to anyone inside the West Wing and say, okay, it's Kamala. We know it's not.
Right.
Or it's Milley. We know it's not. Or it's Jake Sullivan. We know it might be, but probably not.
Yeah.
Who is running our country?
Well, I think it's Obama. For sure. It was Obama through Ron Klain before. And I think Ron Klain had to remove himself because it was becoming too obvious. So who knows? Maybe they have carrier pigeons bringing in the orders. Who knows what's happening? But it's definitely not Joe Biden. But he's not relinquishing what little power he has, because that's the way they make their money is through Biden being in office. And many people in the right conservative media were saying exactly that the reason they don't want to go is that's their gravy train. And once Joe's out of politics, the money's going to stop flowing. It's the same thing when the Clintons were out of office. All of a sudden, the Clinton Foundation wasn't taking in any more money.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, that started happening the day after the election in 2016.
Yeah, right.
And well, we all know what happened to Hildebeest after that. Anyway, getting back to the point you just made, I think it's not only that they don't want to let go of what power they do have with him in office, they're afraid of what's coming when he is forced to leave office. Even if he loses on November 5th, should he make it that far, and of course, I think not, whether he's Arkansided or whether he's 25th Amendmented or whatever the case may be, they don't want to relinquish power because they haven't had an ability to bury all the skeletons yet. And they need to do that. I don't think they were prepared. Why? I don't know. It's almost like watching all the talking heads on the alphabet channels, and I'm talking about those who are on the left side of the spectrum, and they're all scratching their heads. I don't understand. How could this have happened? How is it possible he can't finish a sentence? And people like us are saying, welcome to the party. We've been trying to tell you this for 3 years. This is nothing new. Yeah. It's just becoming more obvious now. You just turned a blind eye for the past 4 years because you suffer from TDS.
Yeah.
And anything was better than Trump. And so you foisted this literal shell of a human being upon us because you hated Trump that much.
Yeah, that was the biggest insult, is to say cheap fake. Oh, these are cheap fakes. It's like, and now is it a cheap fake? That's what I wanted to say about the debate. Was the debate a cheap fake? You're gonna see that euphemism die there on the cross there, because for them to see, for bobblehead or whatever you call her, binder, Corinne Jean-Pierre, to go out there and insult the American public with saying something like cheap fake. He's gotten, Joe Biden has gotten considerably worse over the past year, and even more so over the past 6 months, and even more so over the past month. So,
as a matter of fact, to go off of what you just said, I forgot which news channel it was, but they did, and it wasn't Fox, which is what really surprised me. They brought up the 2020 debate and what a difference. Now, we all know, no matter who holds the office of president, that office ages you tremendously. It doesn't matter who you are. It did it to Clinton. It did it to Obama. It did it to Bush 43. It does it to every person who holds that office, because you literally have the weight of the world, not just the country, on your shoulders 24/7, 365. And so when you look at how his diction has suffered just in the last 4 years, And we saw it then. They wanted to turn a blind eye. So when they started acting so surprised, beginning Thursday night, and it was the same last night. I haven't paid attention today. I've been too busy. But in the last 48 hours, for people like Scarborough or Lemon or anyone, they're all shaking their heads going, how could we have not seen it? Yeah. It was there. You just kept sticking your head in the sea.
Yeah, it was there 4 years ago for sure. I mean,
right.
we all knew that he was fairly infirmed, but not to the case now. I mean, the case now is frightening. To be honest with you, you could see it in his gait. I mean, there were questions about his gait after he took office, but even now, that last when he was going off to Camp David, and he was on the tarmac, and he was the way he was walking, I was like rolling over laughing because this was a very, very senile, maybe not senile, but a very infirmed older man. Just because of the way he was walking, and they all say that the way you walk a lot of times has an indication about your mental and psychological faculties, not so much about your physical faculties. Yeah,
that's correct. There have been neurologists who have said there's definitely something going on, and they clarify by saying, look, I haven't spoken to this man, I haven't observed him face to face. But based on what I have seen, there is no question there is something going on, and it has to be addressed, and it has to be dealt with.
Right, cognitive issue. Whether it's dementia
when it comes
or
to cognitive issues,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. Absolutely,
that's correct.
Absolutely. So, what do you think the DNC is going to do? They're all in a tizzy. The Biden administration, Joe Biden and his family are digging their heels in. What do you think the Democrats are going to do?
Well, based on the gaggles that took place immediately following the debate on the floor, what I found so amazing, not surprising, but amazing, was how, I don't know if you caught this, not one Democrat, not one, would answer a question. They and they were all grouped together in comparison to all the Republicans, the surrogates for Trump, were all separated as it normally takes place. Both teams, each they have their stars that they want to put out there to engage the press and have a back and forth and allow them to answer questions. Not one would take a question, not even Newsom, because they kept asking him, are you willing to step in? And he would not answer questions. And so I find that fascinating because what it tells me is what you and I have talked about privately over the past few days, and that is the pressure's on. There's no question. There have been rumors even before the debate, but certainly since the debate, that the Obamas and the Clintons are getting together and they're having a powwow and something's going to be done. What? Don't know. What will he be 25th? I don't know. I fear if they try the 25th Amendment him, they're going to lose even more support in the polls.
Right.
Because what they're admitting to the country is they've been lying to us now for 4 years.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
They can't risk that.
That would be a public. That would be publicly saying publicly we're a bunch of liars. Right. So
correct.
We're 25th Amendment him, so he has been infirmed, whatever. So I think the only other option is Arkansas.
I honestly believe that is the only option because he is not going to resign. He is digging in. The more the press talks about the possibility of replacing him on the ticket, the more you hear from the scuttlebutt that we're hearing from the press is he's digging his shoes in deeper, his heels in deeper. He is becoming adamant about, I'm not going anywhere.
Yeah.
So there's only two options here, because the third and unspeakable option at this point is to allow him to continue and take all of them, including dog catchers throughout the country, down with him. If your name is associated with a capital D on any ballot this year, all the way down to local races, and we have recent history to prove to this. Okay, we have 94, we have 2000, we have 2000. There's another year, I think 2010, after Obamacare was passed. They lost more seats, not just in Congress, throughout the country. Obama cost them more seats than even Clinton did in 1994.
Yeah.
So they cannot, as a party, risk this.
Yeah.
And so that's why our considing looks like the only viable option to the Democrats.
Right.
And I don't say that lightly, honestly.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, if he is Arkansided, and you've talked about this on your podcast, the possibility of getting close enough to a president to do that is nearly impossible.
Right.
But they pulled it off. They pulled it off in the last century.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm sure they have somebody, a Brutus in the inner circle there. But it comes down to the same thing I said about Julian Assange. He might live a year or so, but he's going to get an ice dart with a heart attack drug in there, and he'll die of a heart attack, just like Tim Russert, after Tim Russert on Meet the Press said both about John Kerry and George Bush, oh, you're part of the Skull and Bones, you know, what's that all about? And so 18 months later, he was dead. So
right.
I think it's possible with Joe Biden, if he happens to die of a heart attack, people will be like, oops, oh, well. And like I said,
and let's
Harris.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, Kamala Harris will be, president for a few months, and then in comes anybody else. So,
and there's been talk in the last 24 hours that she's not going to go quietly either.
Nope.
She first of all, she is still, at least at face value, she's being the loyal vice president that she needs to be. She is protecting her boss the best she possibly can, and trust me, that's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But if you think, or I should say, if they, meaning the movers and shakers, starting with the Obamas and then the Clintons and then Debbie Wasserman Schultz and everybody else in the hierarchy of the National Party, if they think that Kamala is just going to simply say, yeah, okay, I'll go quietly, that's not going to happen.
But
she doesn't want to just be president in name only.
Yeah, but she will.
She doesn't.
She'll be the first. She'll go down the history books as the first female president. I'll bet for 4 months, but that's a pretty rich gift. She might take that, and then she might
only if they promise her, if we manage to pull this out and win the election, you get the next seat on SCOTUS.
Right, well,
that's the only way.
Right, or governor of California, or
governor of California. That's right.
Exactly. So I think there's a big payoff for her, because that's the way the Democrats work. It's like you get greased pretty friggin' well, depending. I was like, what is that noise? Fireworks. So let's move in to I thought somebody was shooting at me for a second there. I mean, I don't know.
Give me a gun.
Well, you do live in Connecticut.
Somebody please get this man a gun.
Yeah. So let's move on to Trump possible jail time for Trump. So the Democrats are having a hard time. So they got a lot to deal with. They're trying to shove Joe Biden down our throat. That's not really going too well. So they have to manage that as best they can. They might push Biden over the finish line. We don't know what's going to happen with them. But sure as shit, after that poor debate performance, Judge Merchan is going to sentence Trump to some sort of restraint. I think everybody's agreeing upon that. And that is tantamount to election interference, restraining someone from campaigning for basically a clerical crime.
Right. So based on our assumptions, and let's face it, that's all it is. And again, because of how poorly Democrats across the board, but starting with Uncle Joe, are doing, Merchan doesn't have a choice. He doesn't have a choice. He's going to have to remand Trump to house arrest. Neither you or I really believe the man is going to be put in Rikers Island. If that were to happen, that may be the start of the next civil war, and I don't say that lightly. Because it's not just about MAGA people. You have people across the political spectrum, with the exception of the 30% hardcore Democrats that want to see that man perp walk in an orange jumpsuit, except for those wackos. Everyone else in the country is like, you can't do that to a president and still call us a free country. And so all that's going to do, I'm calling it the Obi-Wan effect. The more they try to do this kind of nonsense to Trump, the higher his numbers go in the polls. And I honestly believe he is goading them. He is really trying to push them to do that. And I honestly believe, even if he's remanded, whether it's in Trump Tower, which I'm sure it would have to be because it's a New York State penalty he's having imposed upon him. Okay, even if he's remanded to Trump Tower in Midtown Manhattan, he is going to have more reach to the people of this country than if he's allowed to just continue to have his rallies. And let's face it, think about that. If they were to do that, he's going to go to the biggest stadiums that are available in the country and use jumbotrons, and he's going to project from his balcony at Trump Tower to whoever goes to the Trump rallies. I think they'll become even more powerful. Yeah. So they can't do that to him without paying a severe price at the polls. And they can't do that to him without people honestly and truly bringing their entire house of cards down. Yeah. It is that risky to do. Yeah. But at this point, after what Uncle Joe did on Thursday and the fact that he's not going to go quietly into the sunset, they may not have a choice at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be election interference if they restrained him in any way. They won't jail him, but even house arrest would restrain him from the campaign, which is election interference. All right, let's move on to the last story here, which is the SCOTUS ruling about obstruction. And it had to deal with the January 6thers that they didn't actually obstruct official proceedings because the ruling was based on an Enron ruling. Fisher, I guess the guy's name was, who destroyed documents into obstructing an investigation into Enron. And that's what obstruction is, because if you're having a riot, and the fact is that on January 6th, they went ahead with the certification anyway, so nothing was actually obstructed. So a lot of these obstruction cases, including the one levied against Trump, might be moot. What's your take on that?
So you pretty much laid it out perfectly, Rudy. What I want to expand on is why it is the Supreme Court came to such a ruling. And you touched on it, but I want to go further. In order for you to make that claim as a prosecutor, you have to show that there was a governmental activity that was obstructed, that they had to stop. And the fact of the matter is, prior to this happening, because the Secret Service and the Sergeant at Arms, they, meaning the House of Representatives, adjourned. They left the building because there was this so-called threat from all these people who were rioting. And it was at that point the individual was arrested and charged later, because the federal prosecutors were trying to find something other than trespassing to get this guy on. And they couldn't find anything. So they made it up. And again, this goes to what we've been saying about Trump. In order to convict Trump last month, they had to change a state law and then go to the federal statute, apply the federal statute to the amended state law, then charge him with that bookkeeping crime. And then once they charged him with the bookkeeping crime, they reversed what they had done, so it wouldn't happen to anyone else. And in essence, that's what the federal prosecutors did here with regard to J6. And so my concern was J6 was 3.5 years ago. These people, there are still rioters that are in the D.C. jail. There are still individuals around our country that are at this very moment being pursued by the FBI for things that never happened. And so my concern is all these people have lost not only 3.5 years of their lives for simply doing what they had the legal right to do, which is protest. And many of them have lost their ability to earn a living. They've lost their homes. Some have lost their families. Some have lost their lives. There are people that have since died. Okay, not high numbers, 2 or 3, but that's not the point. All of this happened because of made up, I'm not going to use the word Trump, made up charges that allowed the federal government to not prosecute, but persecute these people. And it took the Supreme Court of the United States to reverse this horrible injustice. And this is what's being seen by people around the country. You want to know why the black population is becoming very sympathetic to Trump? Because they're seeing for the first time in their inner communities, well, crap, all the shit they've been doing to us, playing games, putting false charges on us, they just did it to Trump. He's one of us. Right. And that's why people like me are walking around the streets of our country wearing T-shirts with the upside down American flag and the text on the bottom that reads, "I'm voting for the felon." That's why this is happening. And it's happening in the communities that the Democrats need to win this election.
Right.
And trust me, the people in those population centers that have always been counted on between 70 and 92% to vote Democrat, when you have Democrats admitting right now that when they poll blacks in their own inner city communities, they're down to 70%. Now, are we going to get 30% on election day? I'm not holding my breath for that, but we don't need 30%. If we get 15%, that's double versus any other time in modern history since Barry Goldwater that blacks have come out to support a Republican.
Right.
So you have that. You have the Hispanic vote. You have the women's vote, the suburban women. You know what? There's a lot of single moms in suburbia who can't pay their bills right now. And they didn't have that problem 5 years ago. and there's only one person they can blame for that, and it ain't Trump.
Yeah, Joe Biden.
So,
yeah.
right.
Yeah, well, the truth is definitely coming out. I mean, not just with the persecution of Trump, also about January 6th. We know that the January 6th committee destroyed, even Trump brought that out in a recent rally, is that, or I think he even brought it out in the debate, the January 6th committee destroyed all the evidence, that all the interviews they had with Ray Epps and everybody else, all that evidence was destroyed. It's public record. That in itself was a crime. So if people, if people dig deep enough, it's just like 9/11 or Sandy Hook or whatever you want to say, that people like feel really weird about what happened, and if there's something feels weird about it. It's the same thing with January 6th. And now with this election, people might have been on the fence about 2020, but now as we're approaching 2024, all of a sudden people are saying, hey, wait a second, all those people that were complaining about 2020, maybe they have a point.
Right. Yeah. And you know, there are other aspects and regarding that, and that has to do with the fact that Congress just voted to eviscerate the J6 committee's findings. So they're using that to hopefully spring Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro and others from having to do this jail time because of what the J6 committee did, which, by the way, that's illegal. You cannot destroy government documents.
Well, that's just my point. And I'm sorry to interrupt you again, but that's just my point. Steve Bannon was just sentenced for contempt of Congress for not obeying a subpoena to appear in front of the January 6th committee. And the January 6th committee destroyed all the evidence that they collected. So how does this really make any sense? It's like you have a body it's an investigative body that they collected all this evidence, then they destroyed it, and then they put somebody into prison for not turning up to give testimony, so his testimony would be destroyed. I don't, it makes absolutely no sense.
And I want to expand on that for 1 second. Again, I like to draw a comparison. Let's go back to 2009. I don't know how many of your listeners remember this. In 2009, the Bush 43 Department of Justice, in the closing days of his second administration, prosecuted and got convictions for, I want to say, 2 or 3 Black Panthers who stood in the doorway of voting voting precincts, preventing people from walking in and casting their vote on election day. And they didn't touch anyone, but they were standing in the doorways, and some of them had baseball bats and other tools of the so-called trade, and they were prosecuted for election interference. They were convicted. And at the sentencing hearing in early February of 2009, you want to remind your listeners, Rudy, who was the newly confirmed Attorney General of the United States in January of 2009? Do you remember? It was Eric Holder.
Right.
The same Eric Holder who was brought up on contempt of Congress charges and refused to give testimony and was never jailed
for
the
Furious.
Same thing they did to Peter Navarro and the same thing they did to Steve Bannon. And then when you add to that how Navarro's already serving time, okay? He's in jail. And Steve Bannon now has to go to the Supreme Court. He's got his hands in a praying position right now, hoping and praying that SCOTUS lets him out of jail, but prevents him from going to jail. I beg your pardon. But my point is, you just had the United States Congress basically do the same thing for Steve Bannon that Eric Holder did for the Black Panthers, so that the Black Panthers never had to serve a second behind bars. So if there's no longer a charge, even though these two men have been convicted, if they're no longer going to be held on those charges, okay, through conviction, why are they doing time in jail? If the governing body who had the authority to arrest them and prosecute them is now saying, no, we have found that prior committee acted improperly, and therefore we're striking this, and we are no longer supporting this prosecution. Why does this man have to go to jail?
Right. Well,
Eric Holder never spent a day in jail.
Yeah. Of course not.
Right.
Of course not. And the crimes that they committed through Fast and Furious were quite heinous.
Right. I didn't even bring that up. Thank you for bringing that up. That was another thing.
Yeah. Well,
So,
that was he was supposed to testify about Fast and Furious, and so we never got the story. We never got the straight story about what exactly happened there because he refused his subpoena. And usually when high-ranking officials refuse a congressional subpoena, it's like, oh, big deal. But if you're not a high-ranking official, if you're Steve Bannon or Peter Navarro, I guess you go to prison.
Do you know that the Republicans are getting ready to serve? I don't know who it is. It's somebody in the White House. The person escapes me right now. And most people are not aware of this. The Sergeant of Arms of the United States House of Representatives has the legal authority to arrest. And it would be very interesting if the Republicans had the brass to actually send the Sergeant of Arms to the White House to arrest that person who has refused to testify before Congress. I just can't remember who it is, but there's talk about that happening.
Yeah. I think not to go off on a tangent here before we close out, what I wanted to say here is that maybe what we really need to do, and some people have been mentioning this, is to press for the audio or videotapes of the special counsel investigation, the documents case, because Joe Biden might be able to talk his way out of a bad debate performance, but his debate performance should actually warrant the right of the American people to see or hear those unedited transcripts or video or audio tapes from the special counsel interview on the documents case, because people are wondering, is this a fluke? Or is this the way he really is? And as I said previously, is a lot of people are thinking maybe the Republicans were onto something. Maybe they just weren't being partisan in their accusations. Maybe there was something to Joe Biden's, lack of faculties. So I think that might be a course of action to take. I know, some in those circles are pursuing them. That's great. And the fact is that any sentencing of Donald Trump in what is basically a clerical case is going to be tantamount to election interference. Already the persecution is, but really if they restrain him in any way in the last 6 months of a campaign, that's election interference. And there'll be, for most of the electorate, there'll be no disputing that.
And I want to go back to what we were just discussing. You're bringing up that matter, just reminding me who that person is. The person I was thinking about is none other than the current Attorney General of the United States, who has refused to come to Congress and testify.
Right.
And if Merrick Garland, but it's up to the Republicans. This has never been done before. But you know what? there are no rules anymore. Meaning, at a certain point, and I've said this before, in war, and politics is a blood sport. It is a war. It is a war. In war, the aggressor makes the rules, and the Democrats have drawn first blood with what they have been doing, not only to Trump, not only to the J6ers who have been not prosecuted, but like you just said, persecuted for the last 3.5 years, but to good people like Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon. If they're going to do this to us, we have no choice. If we want to save our republic, we have no choice but to use the same powers against them, starting with that POS pseudo-Jew, Merrick Garland. I want that motherfucker in cuffs and dragged in front of Jim Jordan.
Yeah.
That's what I want to see done.
Yeah.
And I don't care how many of the talking heads on the alphabet channels or what the New York Slimes or what the Los Angeles Times say. I don't give a rat's ass. The time has come for us to save our country. And this is what it's going to take. So you know what? Go ahead, Merrick. Test us. Your ass is going to be dragged to the House of Representatives by the Sergeant of Arms, and your ass is going to be in cuffs.
I hope.
I want to see that happen.
I hope that's the case. My also something to make note of is that Steve Bannon is actually the architect of America First. He's the one
Correct.
that coined the phrase economic isolationism, and that's basically the tenor of the nationalistic fervor or sentiment these days. Is economic isolationism, because we want jobs to stay here, we want the money to stay here. We're sick and tired of, having tax dollars or betting or borrowing against our children's future to fund foreign wars that we don't really have, the American people don't have a stake in. So 30 seconds parting words before we cut out, Perry.
Stay tuned. It's about to get really interesting. That's all I need to say.
It will. Thanks for joining me today, Perry, for this special report on Saturday. We had to talk definitely about the debate. It's not surprising, but it is a watershed moment here in the political landscape of the United States. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully they're not going to restrain Trump or put him in jail. But, everybody looks to that as coming. And also probably something happening to Joe Biden. We don't know what's going to happen to him, whether it's 25th Amendment or Arkansas. We'll see. But it is on a brighter note that SCOTUS, including the new progressive justice, Ketanji Jackson, ruled against obstruction for the January 6th case, which is sort of a bright spot. But we're going to have to talk about that a little more in depth on Tuesday. Thanks for joining me, Perry. We'll see you Tuesday.
I can't wait. And Rudy, thank you again for making time for us to have this conversation. It was really important. And I hope there was at least a trinket of information that we provided your listeners that they otherwise had not heard. Yeah. I really hope this was informative.
I think it was. There's plenty of insight there to comb through for sure. We'll see what happens in the next coming weeks, but I'll talk to you Tuesday, my friend.
Look forward to it. Have a great weekend, my friend.
You too. See you.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye. There goes Perry for our special report on Saturday. We talked about the huge fail of Joe Biden during the debate. Now the DNC is in chaos before their convention, their nomination. Who knows what's going to happen between now and then? We don't know what's going to happen with Trump's sentencing. It looks like they're going to try to restrain him. That will certainly be election interference. And SCOTUS's decision on obstruction, which included a vote Amy Coney Barrett, of course, was a traitor to the conservative cause, but Ketanji Jackson voted against obstruction for the January 6th defendants. That's something we're going to have to look at a little further. All right. Thanks, everybody, for joining me today on this special report, Saturday, June 29th. We'll see you Monday. Peace out.